Hey everybody! So we're trying something new today. We're going to make this lesson a Nearpod because today we are summarizing decimal multiplication and division. So the day before yesterday, actually, we learned the moving decimal rule for multiplication. Yesterday, we learned about decimal division. So what we learned is that you should expect the answer to get smaller when you multiply decimals and bigger when you divide them. So just like sometimes you wash your shirt and it's smaller than you thought, that's what happens with decimals. So 4/10 times 2/10 is 8/100. That's an even smaller number because I'm finding out how much is 4/10 of 2/10. On the other hand, 4/10 divided by 2/10 is 2 because I'm seeing how many groups I can make with 4/10 when I'm making groups that are 2/10. So if that sounds confusing, that's okay. We're going to figure it out together. So let's look at this one. 6/10 times 2/10 is what? So just from looking at the picture of 6/10 of 2/10, that purple area is the answer. So do we expect the answer to be smaller or bigger? We expect it to be smaller. Let's look at another one. We're going to take 4/10 and find 3/10 of it. So before we get started, do you expect that answer to be smaller than 4/10 or bigger than 4/10? Let's see. I'm going to divide this 4/10 I have. I'm going to divide it into tenths. And I know I need to find 3/10 of it. So I'm going to do 1, 2, 3 of those tenths of the 4/10. And I can see that that's 12/100. So my answer, the red part, is smaller than 4/10 because I found a decimal of 4/10. Let's look at a division problem. So we saw a problem where we said, how many groups of 2/10 can we make with 4/10? Or what's 4/10 divided into groups of 2/10? And we see it's 2 groups. So with this one, 8/10 divided into groups of 2/10, do you expect your answer to be smaller or bigger than 8/10? Let's find out. So we have 8/10 divided by into groups of 2/10. So you can see that I have groups of 2/10 each. I have 4 groups. My answer is 4. That's bigger than 8/10. So now you're going to tell me if I'm multiplying or dividing. In this problem, I started with 2/10 and I found 5/10 of it. And my answer was 10/100. Did I multiply or did I divide? You can think about if my answer got smaller or bigger. How about this one? Oh, first you probably want to know the answer, huh? So I multiplied. That was a multiplication problem because I was finding 5/10 of those 2/10. My answer got smaller, which when I'm dealing with decimals tells me it was multiplication. Now here's another one. I have 2/10 and I'm splitting it into groups with 5/10 each. My answer is that there are 4 groups. Did I multiply or did I divide? Yep, you are correct, I hope. I divided. I had my 2/10 and I divided it into groups of 5/100 each. Did I say tenths before? I meant hundredths. I divided my 2/10 into groups of 5/100 each, and there were 4 groups. So this is why when we use our moving decimal rule, so for example, if we're multiplying 3/10 times 5/10, and we move our decimal over like this, we think, do I expect my answer to be bigger or smaller than the numbers I started with? So tell me, do you expect your answer to be bigger or smaller? Let's see if we're right. I moved my decimal, so now I'm doing 3 times 5. And then I got an answer of 15. Now it's time to move my decimal back 3 jumps, because remember, I moved it out 3 jumps to make whole numbers and make my life easy. So now my decimal's back over here, and my answer is 105,000. So those of you that thought smaller are correct. I multiplied, and my answer got smaller than the numbers I started with. So my answer is 0.015. And again, that was the moving decimal rule. Now let's look at a division problem. If I divide 3/10 by 5/100, do you expect my answer to be smaller or bigger? Let me know. So let's try it out. Here's my 3/10. And I'm going to start by making 4 groups of 5/100. So I know 5/100 times 4 is equal to 2/10. My picture doesn't do a great job of showing this, but if you think about it, this and this together would make a 1/10. So then just like normal division, I subtract my 2/10. I have 1/10 left. So I still need to split this 1/10 into groups of 5/100. I make 2 groups because 5/10 times 2 is 1/10. And I have nothing left to divide out. All of my numbers are in groups of 5/10. So my answer is I made 6 groups. 6 is bigger than the number I started with. So when I divide, my answer gets bigger because we're doing decimals. I know I keep saying this because it's important. So now you're going to think about which answer makes sense and why. The first problem is 1/10 times 5/10. So think about it for a second. Which answer makes sense? Awesome. I bet some of you use the moving decimal rule. I bet some of you estimated that the answer had to be smaller because we multiplied decimals. Nice work. So the answer to this one was 2/100. Let's look at another one. What if we had 1/10 divided by 5/100? Which answer makes sense and why? Yes, I bet some of you estimated. Some of you maybe used your blocks, and you were correct that the answer that makes sense is 2, because it has to be bigger than the numbers we started with. You should expect the answer to get smaller when you multiply decimals and bigger when you divide them. That's the opposite of what happens with whole numbers. All right, we are finished. Nice work.